Welcome to my presentation on the Efik control and influence over European powers in 18th century Calabar. This presentation will be 3 videos broken up on a website. We'll discuss first the introduction to Efik and Calabar trading in this video, then the development and research into the thesis, and finally finish up with the preliminary research findings. Each video will be approximately 4 to 5 minutes long, and you can move on to the next video by revisiting the website and scrolling down. Now I'd like to set the context for discussion. The research will examine Efik traders in the 18th century. During this time, there was a rapid expansion of the slave trade in Africa and across the Atlantic. European merchants secured large sums of investment money to capture slaves and valuable goods from along the west coast of Africa. The period is of great interest because the volume of trading in the late 17th and 18th century were really accelerating, as you can see from this graph from the Slave Voyages database. So understanding this time period can offer some insight into the flow of money and the shift of power dynamics as the trade was growing. Here are 2 maps of the preliminary location of interest. The left shows a more modern map of Nigeria, where you can see Calabar in the bottom left corner by the port of Guinea. And on the right is a map from the 1800s that shows Old Calabar. Old Calabar was the pre-colonial name. Within this region, much of the focus will be on Duketown, which became a very popular trading hub for many European nations. There was even often a queue of several ships here waiting to moor and trade at this location. And again, we're going to be looking at this area in context of the Efik people, and they were able to exert control throughout much of the Calabar River, with the majority of trade going to a select Efik families or members of the Ekpi groups. So I've mentioned Efik traders several times now, so let's define who they really are and why it's worth studying in this paper. Ultimately, I'll investigate these groups of people to potentially determine something larger about the commercial legacy in this region and the involvement of African middlemen in the transatlantic slave trade. For our study, the Efik people were the middlemen between the white traders from Europe and the inland tribes. They spoke an Efik language, but were often skilled in English in order to communicate with European traders. And so this leads us into the research question and primary investigation of my paper. So the Efiks dominated trade in the Cross River region by serving as powerful brokers to incoming slave ships. Antera Duke wrote a diary that will be one of the primary sources we discuss later, and the rest of the Efik middlemen exerted great control over the European traders. The African people were not at the will of Europeans, as we often think, but instead the trade was only sustained and controlled because of the economic knowledge and influence of Efik brokers. And so this will seek to answer the question of, what does understanding the Efik traders in Calabar teach us about the subjectivity and power of local groups in the transatlantic trade? And I'll also argue that Efik traders possibly played a more influential role in the Cross River region than the Europeans. As demand skyrocketed, the brokers used their knowledge of economics and politics to command a near monopoly on their portion of the Cross River. The ability to negotiate price and limit competition put the Efik traders in a position of significant influence, and this allowed them to profit long-term, even after slavery, through the sale of goods like palm oil. And this will really answer the question of, what did Efik traders gain long-term from their knowledge and influence?